do agree with the Prime Minister, and I will say that the focus now is to ensure that Canada continually stands with international legal principles and abides by international law. That's my role as Foreign Minister. And I want to point in particular to a key question relating to international law, and that is regarding maritime security. The international legal principles at issue regarding maritime security and the Strait of Hormuz in particular are that there should be no weaponization of international shipping lanes and prevention from countries around the world having the resources that they need. In fact, blocking the Strait of Hormuz violates the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, as well as customary international law, and ships from all countries have the right to pass through. This is a very important point that I'm working with countries from the Gulf region and around the world on, and I will be seeking support from them on this very key point of international law. And so in answer to your question, there are many points on the radar relating to international law, and Canada is at the forefront of standing up for principles of international law.
Thanks for that. And Minister, is the US using coercion to get allies involved in the war in Iran? And if not, how would you describe how Trump is approaching America's partners?
I believe that it would be prudent to turn to the principles upon which NATO was founded. And in particular, the principles of collective defense and deterrence, which are triggered by NATO as a whole, not by one country within the NATO family. To our knowledge, a request has not been made to NATO for the type of assistance that is being requested, and Canada, as a founding member of NATO, continues to support the principles of collective defense and deterrence and stands foursquare behind NATO allies in terms of the triggering mechanisms for NATO action. At this point, it's important to remember that those conversations among NATO allies have not occurred.
Thank you. Next question, Peter Zemanek. Go ahead.
Hello, Minister. Peter Zemanek with CBC. Thanks for doing this. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so a moment ago you said you stand firmly with international law. That, I guess, that can be taken two ways. One, this attack may be against international law, but this closing the Strait of Hormuz is also. Does that mean that if you stand by international law, you don't participate in the attack, but you do participate in some way in freeing up the Strait of Hormuz? Have I understood that correctly?
Let's take a step back. First, Canada wasn't consulted. Canada didn't take part in the military operation, and Canada has no intention to be involved in the offensive military action that continues to occur. What is important for Canada, and certainly in terms of my efforts as the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Canada, is to find paths towards de-escalation, to find a solution that is focused on the preservation of civilian life and civilian infrastructure. I've spoken to my Gulf counterparts about continuing to offer Canada's support, and that support will continue to be part of the conversation, not only with them, but also with my Türkiye counterpart today, Minister Hakan Fidan, as well as with my G7 counterparts, and we are set to meet in Paris next week. In terms of the path forward, I want to stress again that it is part of the conversation that I'm having in Turkey, part of the reason that I'm here. I just emerged from a meeting with the Vice President, Sevdet Yilmaz, and both of us agreed that de-escalation and the preservation of civilian life and civilian infrastructure is of the utmost importance, and that is where Canada's efforts lie with Turkey, but also with the countries in the Gulf, as I've repeatedly stated, and with my G7 counterparts. I just spoke with, for example, Jean-Noël Barrot, my French counterpart, last night, and tomorrow I will be meeting with Yvette Cooper, my UK counterpart, to discuss these very points.
So am I to understand, Minister, that nothing has been decided when it comes to trying to free up traffic in the state of Hormuz? That's subject to discussion. And then I'm just going to tack on to the end of that. Turkey has expressed concern as well about Israel possibly committing genocide or war crimes in southern Lebanon. Is that a concern that you share?
That's actually three questions, but 20% of oil transportation by sea passes through the Strait of Hormuz. The practical upshot of that is that countries around the world are not able to receive energy exports, not to mention fertilizer and other important aspects of the food supply chain. In terms of the Strait of Hormuz, the position of our country will be to continue to indicate that there should be no weaponization of international shipping lanes, period. And that includes the Strait of Hormuz. Our current conversation with Gulf countries rests on how we can continue to support them, especially in the face of indiscriminate attacks, retaliatory in nature, by Iran. In terms of the second part of your question relating to Israel, I will point you to the joint statement by Prime Minister Carney with the leaders of France, the UK, Germany, and Italy last night, indicating that the attacks by Hezbollah against Israel must stop, and that there should be meaningful engagement between Lebanon and Israel to negotiate a sustainable political solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, Abigail Billman. Go ahead. Abigail, we can't hear you. Welcome back for Abigail. Next question, Jillian Pepper. Go ahead.
Hi, Minister. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent. Thanks for taking questions today. Have you spoken with Secretary Rubio or the Trump administration directly about the Strait of Hormuz and any efforts to get flowing oil back through?
I have not spoken with Secretary Rubio since the beginning of the military operation on February 28th. I will be seeing Secretary Rubio in Paris next week at the G7 foreign ministers meeting.
Thank you. And just specifically, I understand there was this statement with some G7 peers outside of Washington and Japan calling out Hezbollah and Israel for attacks on civilians and United Nations forces. Can you talk to me a little bit about your level of concern that perhaps a ground a ground offensive could influence the southern Lebanon?
As the statement that was issued last night between Canada, France, the UK, Germany, and Italy underlines, there is concern about the escalation of the situation in Lebanon. In particular, the humanitarian situation is worsening, and therefore the leaders of those countries have called for meaningful engagement between Lebanon and Israel to negotiate a sustainable political solution.
Thank you. We can go back to Abigail. Can you try to talk, Abigail? Hi.
Si c'est possible, est-ce que je pourrais demander pour une question en français? Parce que je dois quitter la conférence de presse.
I have a question. Yes.
Minute.
Thank you, Minister. How does Canada, it's Irep Çakır with Turkish Voice of Canada. How does Canada view Turkey's evolving geopolitical role, and does Ottawa see Ankara primarily, can you hear me? Hello? Okay.
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. How does Canada view Turkey's evolving geopolitical role, and does Ottawa see Ankara primarily as a regional actor or as an increasingly important strategic partner in shaping the broader international order? I mean, should we understand Türkiye now as one of Canada's key operational channels, not just diplomatic partners for managing the fallout of the Iran crisis?
Let's be clear, the bilateral relationship between Canada and Turkey is strong and is advancing in significant ways. In particular, in this bilateral visit, am focused on 4 pillars with my counterpart: the energy dialogue, the economic opportunities for increased trade and investment, defense and security, and strong people-to-people ties. Those are 4 pillars of the Canada-Turkey relationship. In this geopolitical environment, Canada is striking relationships with countries that advance not only our domestic economic interests, but where we see synergies in other areas, including defense and security, and multilateral objectives, including a de-escalation in the Middle East. In all of my conversations with the Minister of Energy, with the Vice President here in Turkey, with the head of Central Intelligence, as well as my previous conversations with Minister Fidan, I will be going to see him right after I leave you here. The gist and tenor of the conversation has indicated that Canada and Turkey share similar values vis-a-vis de-escalation in the Middle East. The humanitarian toll is becoming increasingly significant and concerning, and we must work together towards de-escalation and the preservation of civilian lives and civilian infrastructure, period. And the fact that Canada and Turkey are going to be working together on the international stage to reinforce and underline those objectives indicates the importance of our bilateral relationship and the work we are doing multilaterally.
Minister, Canada's nuclear cooperation with Turkey appears to go beyond commerce. You're talking about those partnerships. Is the objective simply to export technology or to help diversify a NATO ally's long-term energy dependencies or to shape its future alignment?
I want to be clear that both Canada and Turkey are signatories to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Agreement, and I particularly underlined the importance of these obligations in many of my meetings today. On energy, Atkins Realis and Tunash are working together on